Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning, we will be in Genesis, chapter 24, verse 52, through chapter 26, verse 16. Continuing Abraham's servant, Eliezer, quest to get Isaac a wife. When Abraham's servant heard their words, he bowed down to the ground before the Lord. Then he brought out gold, silver, jewelry, and clothing, and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave valuable gifts to her brother and to her mother. After this, he and the men who were with him ate a meal and stayed there overnight. When they got up in the morning, he said, "Let me leave now, so I can return to my master." But Rebekah's brother and her mother replied, "Let the girl stay with us a few more days, perhaps 10, then she can go." But he said to them, "Don't detain me. The Lord has granted me success on my journey. Let me leave now, so I may return to my master." Then they said, "We'll call the girl and find out what she wants to do." So they called Rebekah and asked her, "Do you want to go with this man?" She replied, "I want to go." So they sent their sister Rebekah on her way, accompanied by her female attendant, with Abraham's servant and his men. They blessed Rebekah with these words, "Our sister, may you become the mother of thousands of 10,000s. May your descendants possess the strongholds of their enemies." Then Rebekah and her female servants mounted the camels and rode away with the man. So Abraham's servant took Rebekah and left. Now Isaac came from Beer-lahai Roi, for he was living in the Negev. He went out to relax in the field in the early evening. Then he looked up and saw that there were camels approaching. Rebekah looked up and saw Isaac. She got down from her camel and asked Abraham's servant, "Who is that man walking in the field toward us?" "That is my master," the servant replied. So she took her veil and covered herself. The servant told Isaac everything that had happened. Then Isaac brought Rebekah into his mother Sarah's tent. He took her as his wife and loved her. So Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. Abraham had taken another wife named Keturah. She bore him Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. Jokshan became the father of Sheba and Dedan. The descendants of Dedan were the Asherites, Letushites, and Laamites. The sons of Midian were Ephah, Epher, Hanok, Abida, and Eldah. All these were the descendants of Keturah. Everything he owned Abraham left to his son Isaac, but while he was still alive, Abraham gave gifts to the sons of his concubines and sent them off to the east, away from his son Isaac. Abraham lived a total of 175 years. Then Abraham breathed his last and died a good old age, an old man who had lived a full life. He joined his ancestors. His sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah near Mamre, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar, the Hethite. This was the field Abraham had purchased from the sons of Heth. There Abraham was buried with his wife Sarah. After Abraham's death, God blessed his son Isaac. Isaac lived near Beer-lahai Roi. This is the account of Abraham's son Ishmael, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's servant, bore to Abraham. These are the names of Ishmael's sons, by their names according to their records: Nebaioth, Ishmael's firstborn; Kedar, Abdiel, Mibsam, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadad, Tema, Jeter, Naphish, and Kedemah. These are the sons of Ishmael, and these are their names by their settlements and their camps, 12 princes according to their clans. Ishmael lived a total of 137 years. He breathed his last and died, and he joined his ancestors. His descendants settled from Havilah-Ashur, which runs next to Egypt, all the way to Ashur. They settled away from all their relatives. This is the account of Isaac, the son of Abraham. Abraham became the father of Isaac. When Isaac was 40 years old, he married Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean from Paddan Aram, and sister of Laban the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant, but the children struggled inside her. And she said, "If it is going to be like this, I'm not sure I want to be pregnant." So she asked the Lord. And the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples will be separated from within you. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." When the time came for Rebekah to give birth, there were twins in her womb. The first came out reddish all over, like a hairy garment. So they named him Esau. When his brother came out, with his hand clutching Esau's heel, they named him Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when they were born. When the boys grew up, Esau became a skilled hunter, a man of the open fields. But Jacob was an even-tempered man living in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for fresh game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Now Jacob cooked some stew, and when Esau came in from the open fields, he was famished. So Esau said to Jacob, "Feed me some of that red stuff. Yes, this red stuff, because I'm starving." That is why he was also called Edom. But Jacob replied, "First, sell me your birthright." "Look," said Esau, "I'm about to die. What use is the birthright to me?" But Jacob said, "Swear an oath to me now." So Esau swore an oath to him, and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and lentil stew. Esau ate and drank, then got up and went out. So Esau despised his birthright. There was a famine in the land, subsequent to the earlier famine that occurred in the days of Abraham. Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines, at Gerar. The Lord appeared to Isaac and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Settle down in the land that I will point out to you. Stay in this land, then I will be with you and will bless you, for I will give all these lands to you and to your descendants, and I will fulfill the solemn promise I made to your father Abraham. I will multiply your descendants so they will be as numerous as the stars in the sky, and I will give them all these lands. All the nations of the earth will pronounce blessings on one another, using the name of your descendants. All this will come to pass because Abraham obeyed me and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws." So Isaac settled in Gerar. When the men of that place asked him about his wife, he replied, "She is my sister." He was afraid to say, "She is my wife," for he thought to himself, "The men of this place will kill me to get Rebekah because she is very beautiful." After Isaac had been there a long time, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, happened to look out a window and observed Isaac caressing his wife Rebekah. So Abimelech summoned Isaac and said, "She is really your wife. Why did you say she is my sister?" Isaac replied, "Because I thought someone might kill me to get her." Then Abimelech exclaimed, "What in the world have you done to us? One of the men might easily have had sexual relations with your wife, and you would have brought guilt on us." So Abimelech commanded all the people, "Whoever touches this man or his wife will surely be put to death." When Isaac planted in that land, he reaped in the same year 100 times what he had sown, because the Lord blessed him. The man became wealthy. His influence continued to grow until he became very prominent. He had so many sheep and cattle and such a great household of servants that the Philistines became jealous of him. So the Philistines took dirt and filled up all the wells that his father's servants had dug back in the days of his father Abraham. Then Abimelech said to Isaac, "Leave us and go elsewhere, for you have become much more powerful than we are." Hmm. Yeah, so you have Abraham's servant finishing with his task to get a wife for Isaac and bringing her back to Beer Lahai Roy. And married her, and he loved her and was comforted after the death of his mother. Then you have Abraham taking another wife for himself named Keturah and having 6 more sons by her. Yeah, he had a few sons. And then Abraham breathed his last and was buried in the field that he had purchased from the sons of Heth. And then you have a detailed description of Ishmael's sons. That is Abraham's firstborn by Hagar. And then a description of Isaac's sons, Jacob and Esau. Yeah. Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebecca, and Isaac was 60 years old when she gave birth to the two sons there. So a long time passed in between the prayer for Rebecca to be able to conceive and then her actually conceiving. So 20 years, which is not a short time by our standards. And so, yeah, I think it can seem difficult, like God isn't hearing us when we pray to him. But God has a different time scale on which he operates. And ultimately, yeah, not a sparrow falls to the ground without the Father knowing it. So he knows what we need. Yeah, and then you have this story of Esau despising his birthright. That is, treating like it's worthless. And so he sells it to Jacob for a bit of stew. So the book of Hebrews mentions this as a way in which we can despise the rest that God offers us, the salvation that he offers us, and instead sell it. And then you have Isaac repeating the same mistake, sin of his father. And when sojourning in another land, rather than believing that the Lord will protect him, he calls his wife his sister, and goes on like that. Let's see what Guzik has to say here. Eliezer, Abraham's servant, after a 900-mile journey, stayed one night and then wanted to return that great distance. So, certainly determined not to hang around more than was needed, but act responsibly with the time. Rebecca showed a remarkable willingness to leave everything she knew in order to be with a bridegroom she had never seen. Her words, "I will go," were worthy words of faith. Do not hinder me, I will go. The servant was determined to leave promptly, and Rebecca was determined to make her home with her new husband. She understood that her loyalty should be with her new family. If the world does not succeed in persuading the believer to abide in the world, it will seek to delay his exit. When you decide to go with the Lord, the world will applaud your devotion, but will say, "Don't rush, abide a few days, at least 10, and then go." Isaac went out to meditate in the field in the evening. This was the first mention of Isaac since he was left on top of Mount Moriah. We see nothing of Isaac from the time of his rescue from death, which might be thought of as a symbolic resurrection, to the time he was united with his bride. Interesting. In all this, we see the coming together of Isaac and Rebekah as a remarkable picture of the coming together of Jesus and his people. A father desired a bride for his son. A son was accounted as dead and raised from the dead. A nameless servant was sent forth to get a bride for the son. The servant's name was actually Eliezer, meaning God of help or helper. The lovely bride was divinely met, chosen and called, and then lavished with gifts. She was entrusted to the care of this servant until she met her bridegroom. Yeah. The way Isaac and Rebekah came to each other is also instructive. They served and sought God. Isaac did meditate in the field, and God brought them together. They obviously were more concerned with the will of God than with the way modern thinking makes love purely a matter of feeling. May I say, from Spurgeon here, of this chapter, it records what actually was said and done, but at the same time, it bears within it allegorical instruction with regard to heavenly things. The true minister of Christ is like this Eliezer, son of Damascus. He is sent to find a wife for his master's son. His great desire is that many shall be presented unto Christ in the day of his appearing as the bride, the Lamb's wife. Huh. Abraham gave all that he had to Isaac. Abraham gave his wealth to Isaac, and he gave the promise of the land God had promised him to Isaac. That is, he sent the other sons by Keturah eastward, away from Isaac his son. Then Abraham breathed his last and died. Abraham passed from the scene, being one of the most important men of the Bible. He is mentioned 70 times in the New Testament alone. Only Moses is mentioned more times in the New Testament, 80 times. Died in a good old age, an old man and full of years. Abraham lived a remarkably long life of 175 years. By many measures, his life was not perfect, but he was a man of faith who had a real relationship with God, of remarkable obedience, and a true friend of God. Adam Clarke wrote a good eulogy of Abraham. Above all, as a man of God, he stands unrivaled, so that under the most exalted and perfect of all dispensations, the gospel of Jesus Christ, he is proposed and recommended as the model and pattern according to which the faith, obedience, and perseverance of the followers of the Messiah are to be formed. Reader, while you admire the man, do not forget the God that made him so great, so good, and so useful. Even Abraham had nothing but what he had received. From the free, unmerited mercy of God proceeded all his excellences. But he was worker together with God, and therefore did not receive the grace of God in vain. Go thou, believe, love, obey, and persevere in like manner. Ishmael had 12 princes. All of these descriptions show what a blessed man Ishmael was. Though he did not receive the Abrahamic covenant, God's blessing and hand was upon him. Concerning the sons of Isaac, and the older shall serve the younger. In this case, God chose to go against the accepted pattern of the younger serving the older. In Romans 9:10-13, the Apostle Paul used this choice of Jacob over Esau before their birth as an illustration of God's sovereign choice. God's choice of Isaac instead of Ishmael seems more logical to us, yet his choice between Jacob and Esau regarding which one would be the heir of God's covenant of salvation was just as valid, though in some ways it seemed to make less sense. Paul wrote that God's choice was not based on the performance of Jacob or Esau. The choice was made when they were not yet being born, nor having done any good or evil. God announced these intentions to Rebekah before the children were born, and repeated his verdict long after Jacob and Esau had both passed from the earth. Jacob I have loved, but Esau I have hated. Some object, questioning the fairness of God making such a choice before Jacob or Esau were born. Yet we should regard the love and the hate God spoke of in Malachi 1, 2 through 3, and Romans 9, 10 through 13 as having to do with his purpose in choosing one of the two to become the heir of the covenant of Abraham. In that regard, God's preference could rightly be regarded as a display of love towards Jacob and hate towards Esau. The real thought in Malachi 1 and Romans 9 is much more like accepted and rejected, more than it is like our understanding of the terms loved and hated. God did not hate Esau in the sense of cursing him to a doomed life in either this world or the next. All told, Esau was indeed a blessed man, and in some ways more well-adjusted than Jacob. Yet in regard to the inheritance of the covenant, it could be rightly said that God hated Esau and loved Jacob. Spurgeon. A woman once said to Mr. Spurgeon, "I cannot understand why God should say that he hated Esau." "That," Spurgeon replied, "is not my difficulty, madam. My trouble is to understand how God could love Jacob." Yeah. Our greatest error in considering the choices of God is to think God chooses for arbitrary reasons, as if his choices were random and senseless. God chooses according to his divine wisdom, love, and goodness. We may not be able to understand God's reasons for choosing, and there are reasons he alone knows and answers to, but God's choices are not random or capricious. Jacob cooked a stew, and Esau came in from the field. Here each son acted consistently with his own natural inclination. Esau hunted, and Jacob cooked. Sell me your birthright as of this day. Jacob knew that the birthright was valuable, and he wanted it. Passages like Deuteronomy 21:17 and 1 Chronicles 5:1 through 2 tell us the birthright involved both a material and a spiritual dynamic. The son of the birthright received a double portion of the inheritance, and he also became head of the family and the spiritual leader upon the passing of the father. Interesting take here. I'm about to die. Esau's thought wasn't that he was so hungry that he would die without food. Instead, the idea was, I will die one day anyway, so what good is this birthright to me? Swear to me as of this day. Jacob acted in the character of his name, acting like a heel catcher. He was acting like a scoundrel or rascal and taking advantage of his brother. Jacob was guilty of scheming in the flesh to gain something God said was already his. Yet we should remember the far greater blame was placed on Esau, who despised his birthright. According to Leopold, Martin Luther drew attention to an important fact. This was not a valid transaction, because Jacob tried to purchase what was already his, and Esau tried to sell something that didn't belong to him, and sold his birthright to Jacob. Esau thought little of the spiritual heritage connected to the birthright. He valued only material things, so a spiritual birthright meant little to him when his stomach was empty. Many, if not most people, also place little value on spiritual things. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Esau's character as a fornicator and profane person, according to Hebrews 12:16, shows God was entirely correct in choosing Jacob over Esau to carry on the birthright, even though Jacob was younger. Though Esau's character was not the basis for God's choosing, he chose Jacob over Esau before they were born. Esau's character ultimately showed the wisdom of God's choice. There was a famine in the land. Though Isaac lived in the land God promised to his father Abraham and his descendants, it did not mean that life in the land would be without trouble or challenge. As there was a famine in the days of Abraham, so there was a famine in Isaac's day. Isaac began to go south towards Egypt, as Abram did in the famine. It seems that Isaac thought to travel along the famous road between Egypt and Canaan that went along the Mediterranean Sea. Gerar was the same place where Isaac's father Abraham met another Abimelech and almost compromised his wife. A similar story, similar both in the way man acted and the way God acted, would play out with Abraham's son. The ruler of Gerar was called Abimelech as a title, not as a personal name. This is why both Abraham and Isaac dealt with Abimelech. Abimelech means my father, the king. Because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge. God said that he kept the covenant with Isaac because of Abraham's obedience. A close look at Abraham's life shows that his obedience wasn't complete or constant, yet God recognized it. God could say this of Abraham because Abraham was declared righteous by faith, and as far as God was concerned, all he saw in Abraham was the righteousness of Jesus. And he said, "She is my sister," for he was afraid to say, "She is my wife." Isaac went from such a high spiritual experience in Genesis 26, 1 through 5, to such blatant sin because of the weakness of his own flesh, and also because of his father's bad example. Yeah, he has God himself talking to him and saying that he'll be the father of many. And he will give you all these lands and perform the oath which I swore to Abraham your father. So the fact that Isaac thought he was going to be slain for his wife Rebekah shows doubt in the promise that God made to him. To such blatant sin because of the weakness of his own flesh, and also because of his father's bad example. Peter, with his confession and wrong counsel to Jesus, was a perfect example of how sin can follow upon an outpouring of God's blessing. For good reason, 1 Corinthians 10:12 says, "Therefore, let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall." Lest the men of the place kill me for Rebekah, because she is beautiful to behold. The Bible doesn't teach we are bound by what are known as generational curses, but it is often the case that the sins of the fathers are found in the children. This may be because those sins of the flesh have been nurtured in the same environment and patterned by a previous generation. Yeah. Huh. The Philistines had stopped up all the wells. Wells were precious, and they were difficult and expensive to dig. It was a significant attack to destroy someone's wells. This shows how severe the envy of the Philistines was toward Isaac. These particular wells were dug in the days of Abraham and had served Abraham and his son for many years. Isaac departed from there and pitched his tent in the valley of Gerar. Isaac didn't want to continue the battle and was confident that God would take care of him if he departed. He did, but did not go far. Yeah. In order to dig a well, you would have to bring your own water to the place where you were going to dig the well, and that could be a long distance from any other well. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you have a great day. Bye.